Okay, in this segment we're going to talk about changing the oils in the engine and transmission. There's two reservoirs on this bike. One for the transmission and clutch, one for the engine, oil, and filter, which is up in the front. All right? This right here is the transmission filler bolt. It's torqued back in at 20 Newton meters. This bolt down here is the transmission gearbox drain bolt. It's also torqued at 20 Newton meters. Okay, now we're going to fill the gearbox transmission with oil. We put in 1.2 liters of 10W40 engine oil, the same as what's used in the engine. Okay, put 1.2 liters in there, put the cap back in, torque it to 20 Newton meters, and then fill the engine. Okay, right in here, this Allen head bolt is your oil level check for the transmission. All right, in order to check and see if the oil is correct, you take the bolt out, tip the bike upright at a level position, and we should have a slight drip of oil coming out of there. If there's no oil, lean it towards yourself slightly to see if there's any oil. If there's no oil coming out of there, you go back over to the filler bolt that I showed you and add oil until it runs out of this hole. As soon as it starts to run out of there, you insert the plug back in, and it's torqued in at 15 Newton meters. Okay, a little reminder that when we fill the gearbox transmission with oil, we use the same oil as the engine, and it's 1.2 liters in the transmission. Oh yes, don't forget to change the transmission oil and the engine oil at the same intervals. So in other words, both of them get changed every time at the same time. Okay, now what we're going to show you is how to properly do an engine oil change. First off, we're going to remove the drain bolt underneath the bottom, right here. When you torque that back on, it's done at 20 Newton meters. Then we're going to remove the two banjo bolts. The reason for removing the banjo bolts is that this line here actually drains the oil out of the frame. This line here will drain it out of the radiator. Okay. Then we're going to take the oil filter cover off. Okay, now that we've got the cover loose, pull it out. There will be oil in there that will leak out. Pull this off, okay? Filter just pulls off. When you change the filter, change this O-ring as well. Okay, should come together. All right, then we'll go up and we'll loosen the filler cap. Okay, that will allow the air to vent and all the oil will drain out into your oil drain bucket. Okay, install a new filter. The filter itself will only go on one way. As you can see, the hole on this end is bigger than this end. Just push it in, replace the O-ring, make sure you lube it before you reinstall it. The cap itself only goes back in one position. Take note of the depth of the lugs. When you push it in, it'll feel like there's a spring behind it, a little bit of resistance. Install the 4 holding screws. Okay, make sure the cap goes on correctly. These lugs are different depths. It'll only go on one way. Put your screws in. Of course, do them back and forth so it goes in squarely. And these screws are torqued down to 6 Newton meters. If your filter cover is not installed correctly, you'll end up with something that looks like this. That is wrong. Okay, now that we've got the filter cover back on, we'll reinstall the drain bolt. It gets torqued in at 20 Newton meters. Then we'll put the banjo bolts and new copper washers back on. These are torqued down to 35 Newton meters. What we recommend is the graduated container, because this bike is only going to hold 2.5 liters, 2.5 liters of oil, and the oil will be a 10W40 modified mineral oil. Okay. okay? Not synthetic. We'll put this in here, put in 2.5 liters. Put the filler cap back in, start up the engine, and let it idle for several minutes. Do not rev the engine, do not race the engine, because during this period of warm-up, we're filling up the filter, all the lines we've evacuated. In other words, getting all the oil levels back to where they should be. Shut off the bike, and then within 1 minute, take the dipstick out, wipe it off, put it back in, put the dipstick in fully, and then remove it again. And the oil level should be at the upper line. Okay, if it's anywhere below the upper line, you'll have to add a little bit more. Do not overfill the engine, because it's very hard to get out. You have to use a syringe or some kind of a vacuum pump or something to drain it out through here. So be careful, just put in a little bit at a time. Okay, so it should be at the upper line.